Thanks for joining us on Over My Dead Body, the podcast hosted by Nichola Reader and Carl Tate that aims to bust those myths about all things funerals and answer the questions you never dared ask. So stick in your earbuds, listen, and then send us your questions for the things we still haven't answered for you. Happy listening. Welcome back to this week's episode of Over My Dead Body. I am here with my brilliant co-host, Carl. Hi, Carl. How are you doing?
Hi, everyone. Yes, as always, great to be back again.
You have been a busy boy out on remembrance events this week.
Yes, it's been quite the weekend, hasn't it? And thank you for your assistance as well. It was really good. But yeah, it was lovely to see the town of Richmond turn out in their thousands to remember the fallen, as they do everywhere up and down the country. But it's always special. Being the mayor, I don't know if I've mentioned that in this podcast, but yeah, being
once
the mayor.
Or twice, Carl. Yeah. Just once or twice.
Being the mayor, and obviously it's a special weekend, regardless of that. But yeah, very good. It was really busy.
Yeah, you did a great job. And when Carl says thank you for my assistance, I literally pushed the button up and down on the microphone, mostly down when Carl was speaking. But I like to think I helped the town of Richmond.
You did in some way, definitely.
In some way. So, on to our guest for this week. We are delighted to have with us the brilliant local funeral director, David Knowles. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
And actually here in person, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
So welcome to Richmond. So, David, we already have one funeral director on the show. So, people might be thinking, why have we invited another one? But we just thought you have such experience and such a different perspective on things that it was really worth getting your view and to fact check the stuff that Carl is saying is actually true. So before we get going, David, tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of your background, your history, how you got here.
Wow, right. I've been in the industry now for 28 years, just gone in September. Wanted to be a funeral director at 14, believe it or not. When my granddad passed away, full of questions, what happens here, what happens there, why do they do this, why do they do that? Cut a very long story short, we then go to my uncle, or he's one of these uncles that you call uncle that isn't really an uncle, family friend, has a funeral service down in the Peak District, and gave me a bit of an opportunity to do a bit of work experience when I was just gone 14, coming up 15. Come to the end of school, was going to go to college to do a sports science college course, then thought, why do I really want to do this? I know what I want to do. So old school before social media, going knocking on doors, a funeral director seeing if they would take on a young 16-year-old then apprentice. Knocked on doors of kind of Craig and Mallons, Seaton Lengs, others around the area. Didn't get much uptake, a 16-year-old wanting to get into the funeral industry, no driving license, no qualifications, it was always going to be difficult. So my mother at that time worked at North Tees, was friends with the girl who worked in the mortuary and got me a little bit of a backdoor entrance to the mortuary. While I was there, I was then talking to funeral directors who were coming to collect people's loved ones, and started to talk to a guy called Vinnie Ray, who owned Thomas Ray and Sons in Thornaby. Took me on as an apprentice. And I suppose they say the rest is history. Joined there, passed my driving test. He then took me on full time, then sold the business to the co-op. So we were all copied across to the co-op, and I just developed my career through there from funeral director, assistant manager, regional operations manager. And just before setting up on my own, was looking after kind of central Yorkshire and the 6 funeral homes across that area. About 450 staff. Made the decision to leave to set up on my own. In April 2024, and here we are. So that's my 28-year journey in 2 minutes.
That's it. Yeah, rifled into 2 minutes. But no, it's fantastic, David. Obviously, we're pleased to have you on the show. It's brilliant.
Thank you.
And I think this episode we're going to look back at how things were when you started as a 16-year-old. As you alluded to, you've been in the business long enough. Longer than we have, sorry. And it'd be quite interesting just to go back over the years.
I remember day one going in and being quite nervous. Actually, the building, the owner at the time was always a bit funny about having the lights on. Lights were off, very kind of a bit dark, a bit dingy, not very inviting. And that's no disrespect to that particular funeral home. All funeral homes were a little bit like that. You never saw through the windows. It was sort of kind of a bit, then you go inside. It's one of the first things that probably didn't jump at me then, but definitely does now. How male orientated or dominated, I would say, it was. Out of all the people that were there was only one lady who looked after the administration side of things. But yeah, it wasn't. I think standards probably weren't as good as they could have been in those days. You look back and you think, wow, if that like it now, don't get me wrong, it wasn't disrespectful, but it wasn't great.
Wasn't as professional as we might see today.
No, very much the investment would always be put in the bits that people see, maybe not so much about the. Say it wasn't grimy or anything. I'm not saying that it was disrespectful. It was just not as what it is today at all. It's I think looking back at those days, all the hearses that all the companies had tended to be the same. Everybody had either a light oak coffin or a dark oak coffin. It was either solid for a burial and an oak veneered for a cremation. The choice was very, 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 very sparse. Orders of service sheets that we all see on a daily basis now, and how personal they didn't exist. They were very rare. It was a different time, I would say.
Back in those early days, when it came to the actual service itself, was it still mainly religious, conducted in church? Was there much in crematoriums? Was celebrants about?
Celebrants weren't about at all. So everything was either a church service or a crematorium. I would say that churches were the majority of funerals. That you would either be, if someone was Roman Catholic, if someone was Church of England, Methodist, Baptist, other faiths, you would go to the parish minister of that area, and then have a church service and a crematorium, or just have the service at the crematorium, but with the religious leader of that particular denomination from that parish.
So there wasn't really an option outside of a faith-led service?
No, not until I would say maybe early 2000s. Maybe I'm maybe getting that date wrong a bit, but the British Humanist Association was probably the next organisation that then came in, and that started slowly becoming more popular in that the British Humanist Association was there. But then again, they were very non-religious, so it went from kind of very religious to very non-religious.
I think for me, and obviously, Dave, we started this podcast to get the word out there, get people talking about death, and just let them know that the choices are endless with funerals. And obviously, if we go back to those days, there was hardly any choice around. It was just this was that, And I think you would agree, Nichola, that there's nowadays that there's so much choice, and it's exciting to see what's happened in that time and where we're going to end up going to, because the possibilities are endless, aren't they, Nichola?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think almost to the point where it's overwhelming, which is why we're trying to say to people, start to have the conversations before you're at the point of need, because then you have got some control over some of the decisions. There's so much to decide on. If your family's grieving and stressed and shocked, try and ask them to make all those decisions at the point they lose you. It's really, really hard. But what do you think some of the biggest changes, the biggest evolutions you've seen, apart from that switch to we can now celebrate, we've got more options about your officiant? What else has changed?
I think, that from I spent a lot of time, and this probably works in my benefit. Over the last 10 years, I was more in management within the court funeral care. So the only funerals I arranged and conducted were those that people had asked for me, or friends, or relatives. Then coming back into more frontline, if you like, funeral directing, I did notice a big shift in what it was when I was doing it, day in, day out before. Personalisation, things like I said before, coffins were either light oak, dark oak, solid for a burial, oak veneer for a cremation. Now a coffin can be wrapped in pictures of family event. It can be painted the colour of that somebody loved. It could be a wicker coffin. It could be a pandanus coffin. It could be anything. Swaledale wool. It can be those kind of things that just make that little bit different. Hearses aren't all black, Ford Granadas or Mercedes E-classes. Some hearses you can be I've cared for families more recently where we had a Robin Reliant from Only Fools and Horses. You can get tanks, lorries, motorcycles with sidecars. Tractors, yeah. All that kind of great stuff. And that makes it so much more personal. When you go back to the early days in my career, it kind of felt like families got what they were told rather than now they get what they ask for or that is centered around that deceased person and their life and, wishes. If somebody was a huge motorbike enthusiast, why would they want to have a four-wheeled service? They'd want to be in a motorbike, right? In those days, that wasn't available. So it's great that there's more things that people can do. But as funeral directors, and Carl, I'm sure will agree here, we need to explain that to people and explain the options. And this is great why this podcast and other things that are going on is putting it out there of what is available so people can use.
I would agree 100%, definitely. And when I first started, so arranging funerals, yes, you've got your general sort of list of things that you're gonna ask the family. But there's a lot. It takes a lot longer, in my opinion. It takes a hell of a lot longer. Before you'd sort of look at, let's say, an arrangement would roughly be around half an hour, because when I first there wasn't as much choice. But now it's a minimum 45 minutes up to an hour and over, because you are explaining, or once you get to know the family, and they do mention that he was a motorcycle enthusiast, then you think, right, well, I need to then spin it this way. And you then talk to people about all of the different options there. And it just takes that little bit longer. But in my experience, and I would never rush anybody, I'd sit, if we have to sit for an hour and a half, we sit for an hour and a half, 2 hours.
And it's one of the things we talked about in a really early episode of the podcast back in series 1, about this having permission to ask for what you want. Because still so often I feel when I go and see families, I very often get the question, is it okay if? Are we allowed to? And I just want to say, it's your service. I am not here. It's one of the first things I'll say to a family. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to guide you and advise you and answer your questions. But how you want to spend that time in the crematorium is absolutely up to you. And it's trying to get that message out that you've got the permission to build your service in the way that you want to build it. So you'll have seen hundreds, probably thousands of funerals over the years that you've been in the business. Any that stick in your mind particularly for being absolutely brilliant, or where you think, oh, that one just didn't quite work?
I'll probably give an example of one of each. There's we looked after a funeral for a gentleman where he was originally from Ireland, and he wanted, his brother was arranging the funeral, and it was in the week between Christmas and New Year, and they were trying to arrange the funeral back in Ireland on New Year's. Irish party, celebration of life.
I'm sweating just thinking about that. Sending me over the edge.
Over in Ireland, 3 days, 4 days is standard for a funeral, right? Not 7, 10, 14 plus. It is here at the minute. So, fortunately, this family, the guy had his own business with his brother, were very, very wealthy. They were able to make some decisions that probably, people like us probably weren't, couldn't make. And they wanted to fly him to Ireland for the funeral. Obviously, they didn't want to go on the ferry. But they wanted the family to fly with him. Now, that became a problem when the flights that were available that would accept human remains, I hate that word, by the way, but that's the way that the airline, terminology, the airlines that would accept people's loved ones had no seats on the plane. And the people that had seats on the plane wouldn't accept people's loved ones in the hold. To which the guy said, well, can we charter our own airline? So, Carl, you with me? That's not, we can look at things, vehicles, things. Can we hire a plane was basically the question. So looked at, this is probably bordering on the line when the internet was a thing, but it wasn't, I'm probably going back 17, 18 years maybe. So Sky Trader, I can't believe that's in my head. That was the company who I contacted, and they gave me a list of 3 possible options. One was a helicopter, one was a Boeing 747, and one was this private jet. Went to the client with the information. The client chose the private jet. It turned out afterwards, we didn't realise this until here at Teesside Airport, Alan Sugar's private jet, and when it wasn't in operation, it was hired out from London City Airport. So Teesside Airport, as it was then, and now it's back now, call it that, they were great. They enabled the family to go through security beforehand. So when we arrived at Teesside Airport, we were able to drive the hearse limousine directly onto the tarmac. We picked them up in the local town where they lived, and we placed their loved one into the hall, and the family got in the aeroplane, and off they went to Knockin Island and got their funeral on New Year's Eve like they wanted.
Wow.
And so that's probably one that sticks in my mind. I remember seeing the estimate for what this plane was going to cost and think, wow, that's it. But that's something that that they needed for themselves, is they had to travel with their loved one. And like I say, they were in a very fortunate situation where they were able to do that.
How brilliant did that feel for you? Like, we don't ever do this for the reward or the recognition or it is about just trying to serve and help people. That must have just felt great that you could solve that problem for them.
And watching it take off and think, wow, there you go. We did it, and we did it in like 5 days. Yeah. Where today, it probably wouldn't be kind of that.
So I know when families have asked me for sort of certain requests, I would never say no to a family. I don't think I've ever said no to anybody. And it's just so, we'll leave it with us. I'll see what we can sort out. And there's always ways around certain things, isn't there? I think that's the whole
if
point.
It's legal.
Of course.
Families will say, is it legal? Well, yeah, we'll have a go.
Yeah.
And if you make me break the law, then as long as it's a little one, we're not going to get a huge amount of trouble.
That kind of like question about, if we're doing a burial, can we chuck a joint in the grave with him? It's like, if I don't see that, how do I know? So just tell me to turn around at the point that you're doing that, and it'll all be fine.
I've had whiskey poured in. Never a joint, but I've had whiskey poured into the grave. Yeah.
And those are the little touches where people go, is it all right? And it's like, of course, if that's representing your loved one's life, that's exactly what we should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So any that make you just shiver a bit at the memory of them, thinking, oh, that was about to go tits up, but we managed to save it, or it didn't quite go as planned?
I think one of them, it probably wasn't as planned. It was quite a sad outcome, this. But we had a funeral at the crematorium where somebody became quite ill, and obviously the funeral had to stop. And as the ambulance came into the crematorium, if you've been to some of the crematoriums, the canopy is quite low. It actually hit the lights on the top, so the lights then, were then damaged, and it was, people were trying to work. So I suppose you never know when you're going to be put into situations like that. And as a funeral director, you sometimes, I've used the analogy, you've got to be a bit swan-like sometimes, and that was definitely one of those moments where you've got to be professional, but what's going on around you is really upsetting. And so, that's probably something that sticks in my mind from a scary kind of shocking kind of point of view. There's been others, times where funny stories where you've come to gravesides, and Carl, you'll understand where I'm coming from, and you will as well, because you've seen, the staff where they'll lower the person's loved one onto the sticks at the grave, and then somebody's pants split. And there's a
Carl, ever happened to you?
So no, my pants fit properly and I can bend down properly. But yes, I know lads, it's happened too. Definitely. I won't name them on the podcast, but I have plenty of names. Yeah, but you're right. Yeah,
and you end up looking at the family with kind of permission, and then the family start chuckling, and somebody else starts chuckling, and then in the end, it's a bit, it's kind of a welcomed kind of. But those kind of things have been the best.
And I think that whole kind of being allowed to laugh at a funeral just shows how things have changed, that it's so much more informal these days. It's not, particularly the ones I work on, it may be more formal in churches, but particularly celebrant-led services are just much more relaxed, much more, yes, it's an occasion, yes, we want it to go smoothly, but there are moments of laughter and there are things that don't always quite work as we'd want them to.
No, and I think with the funeral directors nowadays, and again, no disrespect to the old funeral directors because that's all they knew, and that's what they were delivering, a service which was, right for the times there. Nowadays, it's so much, the diversity of everything. There's so much to think about as a funeral director, to offer every service that's available just to make sure that family have got the best sort of idea of what's happening in a whole service. I think that's a good point.
Yeah, and any really strange requests, apart from the can you hire me a private jet, which is pretty strange and unusual.
Yeah.
Anything else that's extreme that's been requested of you?
I remember some time ago where the family, the person who passed away, hated being stuck behind a funeral cortege. Not because it slowed him down, because he was too respectful to overtake it.
Yeah.
So they'd asked us on the dual carriageway going from where they were to where the crematorium that we had the speed limit.
Pick it up.
We don't want you doing 40 on the dual carriageway. We want you doing 70 because he would have liked that. And like you say, it wasn't for his disrespect of, I'm going to be late. It was because he wouldn't overtake out of pure respect.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was that. I think recently I've just mentioned about hearses there. I arranged a gentleman's funeral very recently where he used to tell his family that no matter what was going on in your life, no matter how, down things can be, then watching an episode of Only Fools and Horses would make you smile. And they knew that day was going to be, they're going to feel like that. So out comes the, can you get us this? They'd seen it, they'd seen it themselves on social media. Can you get hold of this? This would be amazing. It would make everybody smile. Yeah. And it did. Yeah. And it was great. Today you talk about laughing at funerals. I've conducted a service this afternoon where they didn't have a celebrant, but the family did it. So they had grandkids. They all came and did little bits. They had one particular grandchild who kind of structured it and kept it all together. The laughter in the room was electric. And a round of applause after each grandchild got up and said a story. It was unbelievable. And that going back to 25 years ago, laughs wouldn't happen at funerals, not at all. A round of applause after somebody had got up and spoke, not at all.
Swearing,
not at all.
You can't swear in church, Nichola.
Can you not?
I've got to be honest. Sometimes when I hear somebody talk at a funeral service and they've given the eulogy or they've just got up and said something brilliant, you can. I don't know whether you do this or but I can sometimes feel that the room wants to give a round of applause, but nobody dare do it first. Yeah. So I do it.
So you've got to go forward. You've got to be the
I just start
the big boy pants.
And you just think, right, I'm going to do it. It's never once kind of made me look like a tit. I've always kind of done it, and everybody else has done it. You kind of get that feeling, don't you?
Yeah, and celebrants will be, when you said you've got your eyes on everything. We do try and read a room because you walk into a service thinking it's going to be a particular tone or people are going to be feeling a particular way. And then sometimes it can be different to that. And if you see that moment where you think, everybody wants to clap this, it's like, come on, let's have a round of applause. And the celebrant you'll know just by looking at what reception you're getting back off people, how far you can push things, if you can really go for it. Like I swear quite a lot in my services, only ever with the family's permission, if they've asked me to put a swear word in. But you've got to own that swear word. You can't mumble it quietly. You've got to properly go out there and deliver it. And that's when you get the laughs and people are like, oh, in a funeral, you said that. It's like, yeah. But it's some of the best laughs. So, yeah, it definitely, I think that laughter and that being able to just read the tone of the room.
One of them comes back to me, actually, when you ask about things, strange requests. The lady whose funeral it was would always be the first one to get up on the dance floor at a wedding or whatever, was always the first one to set the conga off. You know what I'm going to say here. So at the end of the service, everybody congered out of the chapel. That was brilliant. That was before the days of kind of social media and webcasting and things like that. So sadly, you don't get it on film. But that's another benefit of today's funerals and the way we are with technology. Everything's recorded. If people want it, they can look back on it if they want to. That's another thing that people wouldn't have done before. Recording a funeral. That feels a bit weird. Well, actually now it's very normal. And
having people join from all over the world as well.
Yeah, that's totally. It. You have everyone log in and join in the service, regardless of where they are. And I don't know, when you do speak to families, David, obviously you say, well, look, we can have the service live streamed and you can have it recorded. It's usually, with the greatest respect, it's the younger generation that say, oh yeah, we'll have that recorded, we'll have it. Whereas the older generation, oh, it's not for us, which is fine, but it's just that's the way the trends are going, and that's where we're leading up to. It'll all be, as they are all recorded.
And speaking of trends, then, what do you think's on the horizon for 2026 and beyond, David? Where do you see the industry going?
So with trends, I think there's always something that triggers something off. So like, I remember before my time in funerals, but I've got to go with what I was told here slightly from a few years, but when Princess Diana died, she had a coffin spray of lilies, which apparently before that was never really done. Right. So the coffin spray of lilies, which is very popular today and still is, was a trend from Diana's funeral, I'm told. Mm. Then you go down the line sometime and you get to David Bowie's funeral or non-funeral. Did that then kind of start the trend a little bit of that idea of a non-attended cremation? And then you visit a bit more recently with the Queen's funeral that goes back to tradition, back to, the pomp, the ceremony, that everybody's celebrating. So I often think something happens to get a trend, but I think something that I can see in the future, what funeral care kind of, a crystal ball. I think regulation is probably something that needs to, that's coming down the line that funeral directors need to be wary of. Families need to be aware that not all funerals, the funeral industry is not regulated, and not all funeral directors are members of trade associations and things like that. So it's important for families who are listening to kind of understand that and make sure that the funeral director you are talking to is part of a trade association, because that's the closest thing to regulation we've got today. So that's probably something that's coming down the line. I personally see a shift in this direct cremation move. I think people will start to regret it. I think I've personally dealt with people who are struggling now, that they weren't at a funeral. I looked after a family very recently who asked me for a few personal things along that journey of the direct cremation that made me think, you don't want this. You're doing this because the person has asked for this. But with respect, the person isn't the people that are dealing with the grief afterwards. I know from listening to your podcasts, you've covered this before, so I don't need to kind of labour it, but it's something that I can see in the future. Hopefully I can see a circle back on direct cremations, and people realising that just because they're getting rid of the event doesn't mean that they get rid of the grief. I think that's a
great
phrase. You've absolutely nailed it there. Obviously, going back to the first point, the regulation side of things, the recent events that happened down in Hull just highlighted everything about the funeral industry. Yeah. Yes, I know it was a terrible thing, but for the good guys in funerals, and there are a lot of good guys who do things by the book properly and professionally, it was a good point because it just highlighted how good our standards are. Yeah. And as our funeral home, and we opened, we're gladly, the people were saying, well, can we come in and have a look around? Yes, of course you can. Obviously, there's certain bits that you can't go into because of, obviously being, loved ones being in certain rooms and things. But the funeral home's open. Come in, have a chat to us. And that's what I think we spoke on our last, or on all the podcasts, is that if you go into that funeral home and you don't feel right, you can leave. You're not, once you walk through the door, that doesn't mean to say you have to stay there. But you get a feel for how good a place is. And yes, the reviews, but the regulations are coming in, which is only a good thing. And this direct cremations, it always rears its head, doesn't it, Nichola?
Every episode.
Which is fine. And I'm pleased about it in a way, because when it first sort of hit the ground, and it was a huge explosion of, wow, this is the best thing. We can save money. Let's just, we can just have a direct cremation, have done with it, no funeral needed. And I think now we're getting round to that sort of cycle of grief where people really can't cope because they haven't had that traditional funeral, that celebration of that. Because every life for me is worth celebrating, no matter who they are. You celebrate your family's loved one. You celebrate their life, sorry. And to not have that just cuts it short.
And there's always the kind of lag, isn't there, in terms of cause and effect and seeing what's going on. And I think it's taken this kind of surge in direct cremations and people coming out the other side of that for us to actually realise. And think I mentioned it before, there was a published piece of research a couple of weeks ago that actually documented the first case of PTSD from somebody who'd gone through a direct cremation and hadn't been able to grieve. And it's a recognised case of PTSD caused by not being able to grieve. And that's a really big red flag for all of us. And people will accuse all of us in the funeral industry of saying, you're only so down on direct cremations because you're losing out, because you're losing revenue. And that, believe me, you don't work in the funeral industry to be a millionaire. That is not the motivation. The motivation is to serve and care for families. And it genuinely is about just us knowing the good that we can do with personalisation, with celebrations of life, with helping you on that really important fundamental first step that strips away some of the guilt and the shock and the pain for you to make the next positive step forward. So we'll see where it goes. But what else is going to happen? What else has the industry got headed our way, do you think?
Well, I mean, the thing that I often sort of talk about or think about is that I haven't seen it actually in action, or at crematoriums where they have projectors onto coffins. So that's a thing as well, isn't it? And, where you can project images and all that sort of stuff. And the one thing I always quite like, there's a lot of people who walk around cemetery just because it's quite a peaceful place to be. And they have like the QR codes on the back of the headstones.
Yeah,
I think that's fantastic. I mean, you would never think of having a QR code on the back of a headstone. But I mean, there are a lot of people who are quite interested. I wonder, if they look at certain particular dates and ages and things. If it's there, you can research that family. The whole family tree's there, isn't it?
Yeah. And along with projecting onto the coffins, I think there is a crematorium down in the south somewhere. And for those of you who are listening and don't know, most of the crematorium media is run by a system called Obitus. And Obitus can now project onto all of the walls of the crematorium and make it into like a football stadium, or make it underwater like you're in an aquarium, so it feels like it's not just a room. It's amazing, more an experience. I think, wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. I think the other thing, to answer your question originally about the other thing that, how we, up to now, in our lifetime, we've had cremation and burial. There is a third one that's kind of coming up in the background very, very quickly, called resumation. And that's, people call it water cremation. Yeah. It's alkaline hydrolysis, I think is the correct term. But that's happening right here in the northeast. There's a lot of, there's a company called Kindly Earth that are doing a lot of good work in this space. And up just in Hortonley Spring, where they've got a setup already done. This is legal in America. I know from my time working in Yorkshire that Yorkshire Water have approved some of the work that they've done, and I know that they're actively trying to do this across the UK and get the first resumator, that's what it's going to be called, in there. So that's another opportunity for people to then make a conscious decision of, do I want to be buried, do I want to be cremated, or do I want to have this be resumated? Yeah, it actually, the word doesn't sound as appealing. Not that probably anything's appealing like that, but being put into a container that's got no flames, that's just got water, and heated up with alkaline solution that kind of naturally just speeds up the natural decomposition of a person anyway, if they were to be buried. That sounds a lot calmer, and a little bit more. And then I believe the sustainability and the benefits to the environment are a lot better as well. So that's something that's probably.
And families will still be able to retain some, again, that phrase human remains. It won't be ashes, but I think it's a white kind of powdery dust that comes back. So you've still got something that you can have your scattering of ashes, for want of a better word, or that kind of thing. There's also the mushroom burial, kind of, have you heard about this one? Buried in some kind of, I don't want to say fertilizer.
The mushroom pods.
The mushroom
pods, that's the word I was looking for.
They're organically grown in a lab, aren't they? And they're expensive, but they're different. And you when you order these pods, they come, and then just before you're placed into the coffin, there's like a bed of moss that you've laid onto a bed of moss.
Right.
Again,
more for maybe like a woodland burial kind of area that's then going to turn. Yeah.
But then you become part of the tree that grows from that. So you are literally being reborn as something else in nature. So it's quite exciting.
That's amazing.
Quite exciting. So this might be putting you on the spot a little bit now, David. Apologies for that. But if you had one wish for the funeral industry? And Carl, I'm going to come to you too. If you had one wish for the funeral industry, what would that be?
Regulate.
Okay.
I'll answer it very quickly. I think it pains me when you read stories like, a legacy in Hull. The irony of it being called that business, by the way, I hope that it does leave a legacy, and I hope that the government do something. Personally, I would love to see rated funeral directors. Don't know how others listening might feel about that, but knowing that you've got a 5-star rated funeral home or a 2-star or a 3-star, I'd like to see that in the future. I think it's more than, I think we've gone through enough over the years of different issues that we don't need to labour on now. But I think that regulation would be my biggest wish, and quickly.
And it just running parallel to that from a celebrant perspective, there is no regulation of the celebrant industry either. Wow. So you don't have to do any training, you don't have to be registered anywhere. You literally could just set up in your front room tomorrow. And lots of celebrants do. And that's fine if that works for them. But equally, I would urge people to go to somewhere like the Fellowship of Professional Celebrants, the Association of Independent Celebrants, and just search their celebrant databases, because they're insured. They've probably got DBS checks, most of them. They're coming into your home. So you've got to trust people that they're honest and genuine, and somebody's keeping an eye on them, that we've gone through some training and we know what we're doing, that actually we get in regular CPD, all that kind of thing. So although celebrants aren't registered, I would absolutely welcome it if somebody said to me, you need to pay a fee and you need to be registered and be rated and trusted like Checker Trade, then I would be very happy for that. So Carl, your wish for the industry?
Yeah, I think David makes a great point with the regulation side of things. Yeah, that's perfect. But I'm more for the rating, to be honest. I think that's fantastic. And I know that we as a company are trying to push the Google reviews and proper reviews. And I know people can make up Google reviews, I get that. But within that regulation, it has to be a genuine, review. And I would, the good, bad, indifferent, the reviews are all fine. Everyone has their own different ideas. Certainly, when you look at when you go to restaurants or you go to buy a car, you do your research first. And I think that's another thing that families should be doing, is researching funeral directors. And as I said in the last episode, I think you know somebody, then yes, you can use them, but it's always good just to shop around.
Definitely, most definitely. And likewise, I ask for the Google reviews on the bottom of my email, either on Facebook or Google. And it's not about bragging how brilliant am I, what a great job I did. It's really to just give people confidence that you're placing one of the biggest moments of your life or your loved one's life into a stranger's hand. And actually you can trust us. And it's just to try and give people a bit more confidence, I think, that they're in safe hands, if nothing else.
I totally agree. When I speak to families afterward, I ask them to do exactly the same. And bless them, the majority of them do. And I find it quite heartwarming sometimes that in such a difficult part of their lives, that they feel the strength to either write that or send a card, or you think, wow, you've gone through all this, and yes, we've helped them, but they're struggling right now. So to still be able to say thank you and write a nice word, so yeah, I think it's another build on it. It's great.
And isn't it the weirdest thing when people say, "Oh, you've been so kind," and it's like, well, it's the least I can do at the worst time in your life.
Yeah,
the least I can do is just be kind to you. Oh, you've just been so amazing, and you think, but you're the amazing one. You're the one who's had the strength to tell me these stories, to share the innermost thoughts and your fears, and help me put this together. So
I suppose that's quite and I've never thought of it like that before, really. When you go into somebody's house, you're going into we go into somebody's house and they're not expecting us, but we're not delving into deep personal detail like you are. They're sharing their life story with you. That's
what's and all.
Yeah, that's amazing, to be fair.
And we've talked about it in podcasts before. It's really interesting how it comes together on the day at a funeral, because you guys as funeral directors will often have seen a deceased, somebody's loved one, when you've gone and taken them into your care, when you've been dressing them, looking after them. But you probably don't know too much of the story. And I know you've said, when you've listened to some of my eulogies, Carl, I didn't necessarily think that was going to be their story. I didn't think that's what I'd be hearing about their life. And yet we as celebrants know that intimately, that story, but we don't necessarily sometimes even see them till we get an order of service sheet on the day, or we see the visual tribute. So it's a very different dynamic for both of us that all comes together on the day. So yes, it's a real honour to do that. So we've been talking. We're getting on an hour. This could be our longest episode ever. Apologies, producer Steve. He's not here with his water pistol to shoot us today. Otherwise, we'd be soaking wet, a lot of us. So we're going to wrap it up fairly shortly. But David, I just wanted to ask, as somebody who's been in the industry for 25 years, if we've inspired listeners who are thinking, I'd really like to get into the funeral industry. I'm really interested in either being a funeral service operative or a director, or where do you start? What are the skills you need? What are the things you can be doing to get ready to go into the industry? How do they get to be you?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, because it's it kind of lends itself into the fact that we're an unregulated profession. So it's difficult to have a regulated pathway into something. There's no college courses as such. It's, for me, the NAFD do a foundation course that people can do. I think that's probably important in two ways. One, it gives you the foundational knowledge that's there, but also as an interviewing or an interviewer, it's shown that person's made some effort to try and get some knowledge. Work experience is difficult within certain organisations because policies and procedures and things like that restrict them from allowing something like that. Maybe more independent funeral directors would be a little bit more relaxed around work experience. There'd still be, some elements of it that would be restricted from a client confidentiality point of view, and depending on their age and things like that. But reaching out to independent funeral directors with a keen knowledge of what you want to do and why, I don't see there'll be many independent funeral directors that would say no to work experience if the person had put in the kind of effort and proven themselves to want to do that. Once you get into the funeral industry, that's when the learning kind of starts. But I know that's really hard for people who are listening, because once you get into the funeral industry, if you want to be an embalmer, the company that you work for would put you through that qualification. If you wanted to be a funeral director, they'd put you through that qualification as well. But, it's hard if you can't get into that situation to do it. So NAFD foundation course and speaking to independent funeral directors who would probably, take you on a work experience for a day or two if you had the right attitude and commitment to it.
And quite often people are looking for funeral service operatives. So some of the guys who help carry into chapels, those kind of jobs.
Yeah, that's how you can sort of get a little foot in the door, can't you? Just doing a little bit of part-time work, just driving and carrying and washing the cars, because again, that's a really, really important job. It's not like I'll start with that and then go on, because a lot of the team stay where they are because it's such a rewarding job. Yeah. They love doing it, and that's fine as well. You can do anything you want once you're in. That's it. It's just getting that foot in the door is the start, really.
And in terms of skills, attributes, those kind of things for a funeral director, what do you need to be a really great funeral director? Good looks and charm, obviously, which I'm surrounded by.
Open-ended question. I think you've got to be very relatable and reliable as well. You really have to be quite a people for a funeral director. Certainly, you've got to be a people person, I think, and be able to read the room, and know who your clientele are when you're talking to them and how to talk to people. You've got to have those sort of interpersonal skills for it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And being relevant in the community that you work in as well, and making sure that people trust you, that you're being seen in funeral and non-funeral related environments. Sometimes it's nice for people to see funeral directors not in top hat and tails. Yeah. Sometimes it's nice to bump into somebody and talk to them in the pub, while somebody's got their shorts and t-shirts on in the summer, whatever it might be. But I think Carl's absolutely spot on. I think clear empathy and just having that attention to detail. One of my personal mantras is, the little things don't mean a lot, they mean everything. And that's how that's, if you can focus on the little things with families, then everything else just kind of works.
Falls into place.
Yeah.
Apologies if you got the slight interruption of Cisco shaking his ears, waggling his collar. We got to 55 minutes of footage without having a little Cisco intermission, so he had to make an appearance somewhere.
And he's lovely.
He's now washing David's face for him, so which is lovely. So, good point. Well, I think we could talk for hours and hours yet, but we do need to bring this episode to a close. David, it's been absolutely brilliant having you here. If you can get the dog's tongue out of your mouth. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. And I love the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. Carl, thank you for joining us. What else have you got on this week? Are we allowed to talk about it? Are we allowed to say? Do we have to shoot you if you tell us?
Yeah, well, it depends on when this podcast goes out, doesn't it? So we will have had BBC Children in Need here. So we've got Sarah Cox coming, or we've had Sarah Cox, should I say, supporting her on a huge marathon challenge. So that's going to be good. So yeah, thanks for listening, guys. It's been great.
And we will be back to you in the coming weeks with episodes from guests, including a crematorium manager who's going to tell us a little bit more about what happens behind the scenes. We've got Dead Good Legacies coming on, talking about death education. What is death education? Why do you need it? And we're on the lookout for somebody who understands probate and a bereavement counsellor, just to try and help clear up some of those questions that we've had come in from you guys as well. So if you know somebody who is a probate expert or who is a bereavement counsellor, please do get in touch with the show. We would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening. As always, it's great to have you with us. Please do share the show with anybody who you think will benefit from it. Send in any questions that you've still got that we haven't answered, and keep an eye on our socials. We'll be releasing the dates soon of where we're going to be during National Grief Awareness Week. Have a great week, guys, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you for listening, and we really hope you enjoyed and were inspired by this week's episode. Remember that you can get in touch with us anytime to ask a question, offer to be a guest, or to request that we bust a particular myth. You can get in touch via any of our social accounts over My Dead Poddy on Facebook, Insta, or TikTok. Or you can drop us an email at overmydeadpoddy@gmail.com. Just a reminder that whilst all of us work in the funeral industry, none of us are fully qualified grief counsellors. And therefore, if you've been affected by any of the issues that we've discussed today, we highly recommend that you seek out professional or medical support to help you with those conversations. Should you need any support, please do get in touch and we can hopefully signpost you in the right direction, but we can't offer those services ourselves. Thanks for listening, and we can't wait to bring you the next episode.